Hi class, this is Mr. Butler here for another video on chapter 3 in Of Mice and Men. This is part 2 of our reading and analysis of chapter 3, and I'm going to stop periodically to make reference to some of the specific questions about the chapter. First, let's talk about question 1. How is the connection that Slim makes between intelligence and kindness ironic? So this is actually a little bit before where I'm going to begin with the reading, but just want you to pay attention to that exchange where Slim basically says that he notices people who are intelligent tend to be more mean, and people like Lenny who might not be intelligent tend to be nicer or filled with kindness. So what is the irony inherent in that connection? Why is that not necessarily what we would expect of people in terms of intelligence and kindness? So there are only 5 questions for this, not too bad. I'm going to read beginning on page 5 of the PDF document, and then in my paper copy of the book I'm going to begin reading on page 46. So the first question we're going to look at is, how does the story about William Tenner represent the men's yearning for companionship? Remember, companionship and friendship is a major theme in the text, particularly as seen in the relationship between George and Lenny. So let's take a quick look at this story that we're going to see by William Tenner and use that as evidence to explain how it represents the men's feelings of needing companionship. "Did I show you this, Slim?" he asked. "Show me what?" The young man turned to the back of the magazine, put it down on the table, and pointed with his finger. "Right there, read that." Slim bent over it. "Go on," said the young man. "Read it out loud." "Dear Editor," Slim read slowly. "I read your mag for 6 years, and I think it's the best on the market. I like stories by Peter Rand. I think he is a wingding. Give us more like The Dark Rider. I don't write many letters. Just thought I would tell you I think your mag is the best dime's worth I ever spent." Slim looked up questioningly. "What do you want me to read that for?" Whit said, "Go on, read the name at the bottom." Slim read, "Yours for success, William Tenner." He glanced up at Whit again. "What do you want me to read that for?" Whit closed the magazine impressively. "Don't you remember? Bill Tenner worked here about 3 months ago." Slim thought. "Little guy?" he asked. "Drove a cultivator?" "That's him," Whit cried. "That's the guy." "You think he's the guy who wrote this letter?" "I know it, Bill. And me were in here one day. Bill had one of them books that just come. He was looking in it and says, 'I wrote a letter. Wonder if they put it in the book.' But it wasn't there. Bill says, 'Maybe they saving it for later.' And that's just what they done. There it is." "Guess you're right," said Slim. "Got it right in the book." George held out his hand for the magazine. "Let's look at it." Whit found the place again, but he did not surrender his hold on it. He pointed out the letter with his forefinger, and then he went to his box shelf and laid the magazine, carefully in. "I wonder if Bill's seen it," he said. "Bill and me worked in that patch of field peas. Run cultivators, both of us. Bill was a hell of a nice fella." During the conversation, Carlson had refused to be drawn in. He continued to look down at the old dog. Candy watched him uneasily. At last, Carlson said, "If you want me to, I'll put the old devil out of his misery." So before we get into Candy's dog and what Carlson wants to do, Whit notices a letter in a magazine for ranchers. And so throughout the book, you have a couple references of how, for entertainment, these ranchers who are busy working out in the farm, after they come into the bunkhouse after a day's work, they might pick up one of these rancher magazines. And in it, there is these sort of dramatized stories. They might be called serials of, stuff that these guys would like to read about, like cowboys, things like that. And one of the men who temporarily worked at the ranch, it's really important that these men are not attached to the farm. They're migrant workers. They move around. And so because of their transience, because of the fact that they have to move around from ranch to ranch, they can never settle in one place. And so what's really symbolic about this letter that William Tenner writes to this magazine is, for one, it's kind of nice that all the men are excited that this guy that they knew has been published in one of these magazines, even if it is just fan mail, basically. But 2, it reminds them of him. And so because his letter is published and they see that in the magazine, they start to think about him. One of the men talks about how he's a really good cultivator, operator, and so his memory kind of lives with this letter and shows that the men not only don't really get a chance to maintain these friendships because they're often moving away to other places, but that these friendships could easily be forgotten. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Steinbeck put this moment in the book. So you can take what I said and use some of the reasoning and some of the evidence from the text that I read to answer number 2. How does the story about William Tenner represent the men's yearning for companionship? Hopefully we saw that with what we read. Okay, now we're going to keep reading until we get up to number 3. How does George explain his mistrust of women? Which is going to be kind of sexist, but important for us to take a look at. So I'm going to keep reading until we get up to evidence that is relevant for number 3. Candy said hopefully, "You ain't got no gun, remember now." Carlson is suggesting that he kill Candy's dog, an act of mercy because Candy's dog is old and in pain and kind of a nuisance to everyone around him. Kind of like another character we know, but we'll get to that later. Candy said, "Maybe tomorrow. Let's wait till tomorrow." "I don't see no reason for it," said Carlson. He went to his bunk, pulled his bag from underneath it, and took out a Luger pistol, which is a gun. "Let's get it over with," he said. "We can't sleep with him stinking around in here." He put the pistol in his hip pocket. Candy looked a long time at Slim to try to find some reversal, and Slim gave him none. Remember, Slim's kind of, the men really look up to him, so because Slim is okay with this plan, Candy's feeling sad, like he's going to lose his dog. At last, Candy said softly and hopelessly, "All right, take him." He did not look down at the dog at all. He lay back on his bunk and crossed his arms behind his head and stared at the ceiling. From his pocket, Carlson took a little leather thong or a little leather strap. He stooped over and tied it around the old dog's neck. All the men except Candy watched him. "Come, boy, come on, boy," he said gently. And he said apologetically to Candy, "He won't even feel it." Candy did not move nor answer him. He twitched the thong or the leash. "Come on, boy." The old dog got slowly and stiffly to his feet and followed him gently, pulling the leash. Slim said, "Carlson?" "Yeah?" "You know what to do." "What you mean, Slim?" "Take a shovel," said Slim shortly. "Oh, sure, I get you." He led the dog out into the darkness. George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Slim said loudly, "One of my lead mules got a bad hoof. Gotta get some tar on it." His voice trailed off. It was silent outside. Carlson's footsteps died away. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. George chuckled. "I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more now that he's got a pup." Slim, which is kind of a mean thing to say. I mean, it's ironic because Candy's about to lose his dog, and Lenny just got a new puppy, and they're thinking about how Lenny might be getting a lot of joy out of this puppy, and Candy's about to lose his dog. So that's kind of painfully ironic, one might say. Slim said, "Candy, you can have any one of them pups you want." Candy did not answer. The silence fell in the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, "Anybody like to play a little euchre?" Which I don't know what that is. I guess it's a card game. "I'll play out a few with you," said Whit. They took places opposite each other at the table under the light, but George did not shuffle the cards. He rippled the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room so that he stopped doing it. So it's this awkward silence because they're waiting to hear the gunshot go off when Candy kills when Carlson kills Candy's dog. The silence fell in the room again. A minute passed and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down at it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. "Sounds like there was a rat under there," said George. "We ought to get a trap down there." Wood broke out. "What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't going to get no euchre played this way." George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned toward him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. So that's the moment Candy realizes he's lost his dog. George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, "I guess you guys really come here to work." "How do you mean?" George asked. Whit laughed. "Well, you come on Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday." "I don't see how you figure," said George. Whit laughed again. "You do if you'd have been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand. But you come to work Friday noon, you got to put in a day and a half no matter how you figure." So here Whit is talking about like how you can kind of play the system and get some more meals out of it depending on the timing of when you arrive to do one of these jobs at the ranches. George looked at him levelly. "We're going to stick around a while," he said. "Me and Lenny going to roll up a stake, which means they're going to stay to work enough to save up some money." The door opened quietly and the stable buck put in his head, a lean Negro head lined with pain, the eyes of patience. "Mr. Slim?" Slim took his eyes from old Candy. "Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter? You told me to warm up tar for that mule's foot. I got it warm." "Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on." "I can do it for you if you want, Mr. Slim." "No, I'll come do it myself." He stood up. Crooks said, "Mr. Slim?" "Yeah?" "The big new guy's messed around with your pups out in the barn." "Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of these pups. Just that I'd tell you," said Crooks. "He's taking him out of the nest and handling him. That won't do him no good." "He won't hurt him," said Slim. "I'll come along with you now." George looked up. "If that crazy bastard's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim." Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt and picked up his cards and examined them. "Seen the new kid yet?" he asked. "What kid?" George asked. "Why, Curly's new wife." And now we're getting into some evidence that's going to be related to question number 3. "Yeah, I seen her." "Well, ain't she a Lulu?" Not a very nice term. "I ain't seen that much of her," said George. Pretty funny. Whit laid down his cards impressively. "Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eyes going all the time on everybody." I'm going to let you consider the figurative language of what that might mean. The eye. Got the eye going. "I don't know what the hell she wants," George asked casually. "Been any trouble since she got here?" It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate solitaire hand. 7 cards, 6 on top and 5 on top of those. Whit said, "I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time a guy is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she'd leave something laying around and she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from the guys, and Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but they ain't nothing come of it yet." George said, "She's gonna make a mess. They's gonna be a bad mess about her. She's jailbait, all set on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her." So, well, once again, it's important here to understand that Curly's wife is not really getting a fair treatment if we're stepping outside of the novel now and we're looking at this from the perspective of literary analysis, especially from the historical. We're looking back on this book from a historical perspective. We understand that this is not very just in terms of the way that Curly's wife is rendered. She never really gets to speak for herself until the very end of the book. We do get a sense of her person and a glimmer into her ambitions and desires as a human being. But right now, all we really have to go by are the comments of other men, and they don't view her very positively. So that's not a very positive rendering of female character in this case. So that's important to think about. So number 3, how does George explain his mistrust of women? This is going to be evidence you're going to find as I